Hey everyone, welcome back to another Fluree produced video. Today we're doing a fireside chat talking about JSON-LD. If you know Fluree, you definitely know that we hold linked data in high regard and believe that it is one of those keys to interoperability and unlocking data as a strategic asset for the enterprise instead of just sort of a byproduct of an application. So yeah, if you're a developer or you're work with data, you most likely have come across JSON, JavaScript object notation, very universal standard format for storing data. But you probably haven't come across JSON-LD. So Brian, let's define it. Let's start at the very beginning. What is JSON-LD and what might it look like to the standard developer or data analyst?
Yeah, and you probably haven't come across it unless you're in search engine optimization of all things,
the killer use case.
Kind of the opposite thing of how we're going to talk about it today. But yeah, the LD in JSON-LD stands for linked data, as you introduce the concept. And so linked data, for people who get familiar and start working with linked data, it makes all the sense in the world. You just immediately know this is how all data should be represented once you start working with it. But there's been a relatively small community that have actually, really leveraged linked data, and a lot of them have focused in the data science kind of knowledge graph space. So JSON-LD is really just using the JSON serialization format as a way to represent linked data, and it really looks and feels a lot like just representing JSON objects. So developers who have and are familiar with JSON, this should be a fairly easy transition. There's kind of some new concepts that get layered on top that enable the power of linked data behind the JSON information. But yeah, we're really excited about it. I mean, we feel like this is how we're going to help get this format of data better introduced to a broader community.
So let's look at the JSON document. What are the added components? Does it look the same with just a few added components, or is it completely different?
Yeah, it looks almost the same. In fact, you can, in many cases, take just a plain JSON document and wrap it in one component called a context. And a context is just a mapping from whatever sort of keys that you use inside your proprietary JSON document and how they map to some vocabulary term that might be more recognized. So of course, in the SEO space, schema.org, which is maintained by Google and Microsoft and Yahoo, is going to be familiar to folks. But in financial services space, there's the FIBO ontology. In the healthcare space, there's FHIR, which can be represented as one of these vocabularies or terms. There's also SNOMED, which has been there. So these different domains have vocabularies that are being used in them. So yeah, at a basic level, you can have some data in JSON that maybe talks about a medicine or talks about a financial transaction or talks about whatever. Have it have your own proprietary way of talking about that, but just add something called a context, which it uses the key @ context, that says, hey, when I talk about, dosage in mine, it really refers to, in the FHIR vocabulary, it really refers to this more globally understood term that's been standardized.
Yeah, so when we're sharing data within the enterprise, basically JSON-LD can help future-proof that data for resharing and reuse, and the data comes pre-packaged with the context that the other system needs to make an inference.
Yeah, I mean, really what you're trying to do is take data that you're already producing and sort of give it that Rosetta Stone, if you will. I mean, the goal is we want machines to be able to understand what the data means, without what we typically do right now is we take the data that we have in whatever format, some app is putting out, which generally is the format that the app developers created for it, right, because they needed something to kind of store their state, without really having to worry about people outside of their own app, right? So, we're coming very quickly into a world where we have to worry immensely about the data we have because it's key to our business's success. So now we need all these kind of data silos. Of course, it's a pretty overused term, but we need to get these data silos into a format that can be used by data science communities, can be used by integration for when putting together other apps. We've approached that traditionally by people hand rolling, custom ETL, extract, transform, load processes, so they're writing scripts, they're trying to use tools to do this. But of course, data formats change. The scripts are constantly falling out of date, and it's expensive to maintain. So, this is a way of saying, okay, let's stop kind of doing all this on a one-off basis, and let's try and leverage some broader vocabulary that we're going to try and use. And when I say that, I fully acknowledge that the world is not going to agree on a single vocabulary. That's always a lofty goal. It would make our jobs in the data world a lot easier if people would, but it won't happen. And in fact, even inside of a company, you're probably going to have a hard time getting everyone to leverage the same vocabulary. So you need tools to be able to translate between those pretty easily. So JSON-LD is part of the tool, but there's really additional capabilities that come into linked data that allow you a whole nother layer of tools to be able to map between vocabularies as well. So you kind of have layer upon layer of automatic tooling that allows you to connect data together.
So let's talk about the enterprise. It sounds promising and very incredible, but where's that initial use case? Are we going to get existing JSON data into JSON-LD, or should folks be focusing on greenfield projects where they know their data has future potential use cases?
Yeah, I think it's coming around areas where we're outgrowing data lakes and data warehouses.
Okay.
So, data lakes and data warehouses, I think, are a good place to look to find data. And the data's in there for a reason. It's because someone needed it for some analysis or something. But it's also a very rudimentary approach at a high level to working with data. I mean, what you're literally doing is you're physically copying data from its source and you're pasting it into a data lake or data warehouse. And when you do that, you not only lose all security around that data, because the security for the data kind of sat in the app itself, but it's also immediately outdated. Because at the point I copied it, it was current, but now it's not current. So now, how am I going to keep it updated? So you can invest a little bit in that or a lot in that if it really needs to, stay in real time. So and it's quite limited then because of these issues in what you can really tackle. So I think if you look at a lot of data lakes and data warehouses, they're focused on really high value data. They're, and that's going to depend by organization. It might be customer data, it might be supply chain data, product data, sales data, finance related data. But we're getting to the point where we have an even broader need for probably that same high value data initially. You asked about the initial use case. It's probably that same data, but we probably need to do more with it more quickly. We want that data to be more real time. We want to avoid constant errors as we're, or as data is evolving from the apps, but we're having to update our custom scripts, If we can get to a point where when the data evolves, we're constantly referencing a common vocabulary, we can avoid a lot of that middle ground. So ultimately, everything I'm talking about is where data needs to be shared. It's where data needs to be used by people outside of the app. Right. And that's, of course, happening more and more.
And potentially outside of the organization.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's ultimately what we get excited about and we talk a lot about. And it's exciting to talk about that because I think it really opens up just immense opportunities for folks. But we're constantly talking to people about this grand future and they say, whoa,
I'm dealing with my data tech debt.
Yeah, they can't even do that, even within a department sometimes, let alone within their own companies. And then thinking about, how they're going to dynamically exchange data across boundaries, across organizations, or leverage very dynamically third-party data sets into their own. It's just, for a lot of companies, that's many steps ahead of even where they are today.
Well, speaking of steps ahead, maybe we get into this in another video, but JSON-LD has a whole set of unlocking capabilities for some really interesting emerging technology, verifiable credentials, decentralized ID, decentralized data. Maybe that will be sort of the follow-up to this video. But in the meantime, let's talk about why we're, as a company, so passionate about JSON-LD. What can you tell us about upcoming product?
Yeah, I mean, so ultimately, JSON-LD, we've talked about it even a layer deeper than what's it there to help you do. And it's really a signal to noise ratio issue. We have a lot of noise right now in our data. We have very little signal. So everything we're doing right now is trying to get more signal out of our data. And we're doing it in pockets where it's necessary because it's extraordinarily expensive and difficult, the things we've talked about. So JSON-LD in an organization that focuses on JSON-LD, and more generically, because I said JSON-LD is a way to serialize linked data in JSON, linked data as a whole. So whether it's in JSON-LD or other formats that are out there, or other ways of representing that, which could be, the turtle format, which people have been working in the space, of course, will know and probably primarily use, or other formats of representing that. The idea of linked data itself is where the excitement is, because it really unlocks the signal capability of your information, right? It's all about getting rid of the noise. And so that's when to use it. So your question was, why are we excited?
Yeah, why are everyone at Fluree is excited about JSON-LD? Yeah,
well, it's because JSON-LD as a way of representing data like this didn't fully exist when we started building Fluree. In fact, the JSON-LD standard, I think, well, I won't quote the date because I think I'll be wrong, but it's within the last 3 or so years. So we had a challenge of creating a form of data that's a higher level of JSON-LD, what JSON-LD is, into what's called the verifiable credential now, which also didn't exist when we started building Fluree. We had to build these concepts ourselves. And we originally chose JSON as a way of representing and transacting with data in Fluree. And then we'd wrap these in specialized cryptography that allows us to do all the cool things that we're able to do with our product. Well, along have come JSON-LD and verifiable credentials in that time. And they give us a set of standards now that we can leverage from our technology without having to use the ways that we did these things previously. So the next version of Fluree, Fluree Next, we throw around a couple names, is entirely based around interacting with it with JSON-LD. So anyone who's dealt with the standards before, it's a direct translation. There's a lot of data specifically in some of these standards that already exist. Put it right into Fluree, and we're really building on top of that foundation with the unique things that we can do from there.
You think there's going to be a very short learning curve for the typical developer looking to pick up Fluree?
Yeah, I think that's the exciting part. I mean, when we originally went down this path, we chose JSON as the way to interact with it. The idea being that that's what a lot of developers are used to having to use. Like it or not like it, there are things to like about JSON and some things to not like about JSON, but it is pretty ubiquitous. So that's why we chose JSON originally. And so the kind of trying to bridge the power of linked data with the tools that most developers already have has always been a challenge. That's why we went down that route. I think the linked data standards community, and by the way, these are all World Wide Web Consortium standards. The linked data standards community has always embraced these concepts, but there's been a gap between what people know how to use and this tech, right? So people are used to traditional databases,
MongoDB,
relational databases. They're used to JSON. They're used to sort of certain things that they've been using for a long time. They're not used to linked data. And so bringing JSON as a serialization format for linked data, I think helps bridge that gap in a way that it's been difficult to bridge. So I hope we see, really broad adoption. I think anyone used to using JSON, this will be an easy transition for them to enter in a whole new world of capability around data. I mean, a really exciting world around capability for data. And anyone who's used other ways of historically working with linked data can easily transform that data into JSON-LD now. A lot of the tools that people are been using for a long time have the ability to export data now as JSON-LD. So I think hopefully it brings these worlds together in a new, exciting way.
That is exciting.
Sure.
Well, we'll end on that. Check out our YouTube channel, Fluree PBC. And until next time, thank you very much. And thank you, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Thanks, everyone.